Hi, this is Don Juan with another podcast. It's number 6. It's been a while since I did the last one. It's because there's been a lot happening in the background. One of my sons has recently encountered a mobile phone tower, transmission tower, being erected 250 or 300 metres away from his home. And that's prompted me to do 10 articles on EMF. I was going to cover EMF anyhow, but I decided to bring it forward. And I'm also extensively conversing with the powers to be, our PANZA, which regulates allowable levels of EMF in Australia, and talk about a regulatory capture situation where a government department is simply serving the industry and not the public. It's a good example, and I've started another Substack actually, which chronicles all the correspondence that I've had with Panzer. That's panzerwatch.substack.com. So with regard to the articles, the EMF articles, I'm up to Article 8, which has been published, and about to publish Article 9 and 10. So that's been happening. I haven't yet branched out into the interview situation on these podcasts, but that will be coming eventually. Tonight, I just want to cover a small topic which is not covered by an article, similar to what I have been doing, just a small topic that may be helpful. So tonight's article is to do with synthetic versus natural. So let's get going on that subject, and I'll start up the overheads, which will help you in understanding this issue. Natural versus synthetic. Why the source of your supplement matters. We're going to use astaxanthin as a case study in the biological inferiority of synthetic and bioengineered nutrients. Across the supplement industry, a consistent and troubling pattern has emerged. Naturally occurring compounds are replicated synthetically or via genetic engineering, then sold under the same or similar labeling as the genuine article. The assumption underlying this practice is that the synthetic molecule is equivalent to the natural one. The science increasingly says otherwise. Stereochemistry, esterification, cofactors, and molecular context all influence how a compound behaves in the human body. And in case after case, the synthetic version falls measurably short of its natural counterpart in biological activity and bioavailability. Astaxanthin, the most potent antioxidant carotenoid known to science, is the clearest and most instructive example of this problem. However, it is far from alone. Astaxanthin is a carotenoid responsible for the vivid pink-red pigmentation of wild salmon, krill, shrimp, and flamingos. Its unique molecular architecture allows it to span the full width of a cell membrane, neutralizing free radicals on both the interior and exterior surfaces, a capability shared by no other common antioxidant. Research suggests it quenches singlet oxygen up to 6,000 times more effectively than vitamin C. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and blood-retinal barriers, making it active in the nervous system and eyes in ways most antioxidants cannot. The only meaningful natural source of astaxanthin for human supplementation is the freshwater microalgae H. pluvialis, which accumulates the compound up to 3 to 5% of its dry biomass as a stress response survival mechanism. The global astaxanthin market is projected to reach $1 to $5 billion by 2027-28, driven by demand for health supplements. Astaxanthin comes in 3 slightly different molecular shapes. The natural version, from algae, is almost entirely one specific shape, the same one the human body is built to absorb and use. Synthetic astaxanthin, made from petroleum chemicals, is a random jumble of all three shapes mixed together and is processed differently by the body. Biological consequences are significant. Capelli demonstrated that natural astaxanthin from H. pluvialis was approximately 20 times more effective scavenging free radicals per milligram than synthetic astaxanthin. 12.34% inhibition versus 0.59. Across a range of studies, natural astaxanthin is estimated to be 2 to 10 times more bioactive overall. Beyond efficacy, synthetic production generates carbon emissions up to 10 times higher than those of natural algae cultivation and produces toxic waste streams, including volatile organic compounds. The European Food Safety Authority restricts synthetic astaxanthin to animal feed, excluding it from human supplements. However, it still dominates aquaculture, including farmed salmon, purely on cost grounds. A new and more insidious threat has emerged: precision fermented astaxanthin produced using genetically engineered yeast strains. Companies including Willow Bioscientists in Canada, NextFern Israel, and Biomedican California have developed GE microbial platforms to produce astaxanthin at a lower cost than algae-based production. Because downstream purification removes all detectable genetic material, these products can be labeled natural under the current US regulations, a labeling loophole that leaves consumers without the information needed to make an informed choice. No published clinical data yet directly compare the bioavailability of precision fermented astaxanthin with genuine H. pluvialis derived material. Astaxanthin is one of the most extreme examples of synthetic inferiority, but the structural and biological principles it illustrates are evident in many other widely consumed supplements. Vitamin E is the closest parallel. Natural vitamin E is derived from plant oils. Synthetic vitamin E is a racemic mixture of 8 stereoisomers, only one of which the body preferentially retains. Clinical studies consistently show that natural vitamin E is approximately twice as bioavailable as the synthetic form. However, the cheaper DL form dominates the market, with the singlet letter prefix the only distinguishing feature in most labels. Vitamin K2 shows a different but equally significant divergence. The natural form most relevant to human health is MK7, found in fermented foods such as natto, with a biological half-life of several days, allowing sustained activity in the body. Synthetic MK4 is chemically produced from menadione, a compound flagged for potential toxicity at high doses, and clears the bloodstream within hours. Both are sold interchangeably as vitamin K2, with little consumer-facing distinction. Beta-carotene offers perhaps the most clinically significant example. Natural beta-carotene from algae contains a biologically representative mixture of cis and trans isomers. Synthetic beta-carotene is almost entirely the all-trans form. In 2 large randomized trials, high-dose supplementation with synthetic beta-carotene was associated with a significant increase in lung cancer incidence among smokers. This finding has never been replicated using a mixture of natural carotenoids. The structural difference between synthetic and natural forms is the most plausible explanation for this divergence. Folic acid, synthetic vitamin B9, versus natural folate illustrates a different mechanism of inferiority. The enzyme MTHFR must convert synthetic folic acid to become biologically active. An estimated 40 to 60% of the population carries MTHFR gene variants that impair this conversion, leading to the accumulation of unmetabolized folic acid in the blood, a state associated with masking B12 deficiency and other adverse outcomes in some studies. The natural active form, methylfolate, bypasses this enzyme entirely and is directly bioavailable. More recent research has identified a further neurological consequence. Excess synthetic folic acid has been shown to impair transport of methylfolate across the blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier, with CSF levels normalizing only after folic acid was reduced or ceased. Coenzyme Q10 presents another version of the problem. Most budget supplements contain ubiquinone, the oxidized inactive form, which the body must convert to ubiquinol, the reduced active form, before it can function. This conversion declines substantially with age, precisely when the people begin supplementing. Studies comparing the two forms show significantly higher plasma levels with ubiquinol supplementation, particularly in older adults. More recently, evidence suggests that formulation quality, solubilization method, and lipid carrier can also significantly affect absorption, and that ubiquinone is converted to ubiquinol during digestion regardless of the form consumed. A well-formulated ubiquinone product may therefore approach the performance of a standard ubiquinol soft gel. The pattern across these nutrients is consistent. In each case, a naturally occurring compound with specific stereochemical esterification or cofactor properties is replicated synthetically or via bioengineering, and while chemically similar, the replication is biologically incomplete. The human body has evolved over millions of years to recognize and process specific molecular configurations. Presenting it with a racemic mixture of an incompletely converted precursor or an isolated synthetic isomer is not equivalent to supplying the natural form. The regulatory framework has not kept pace with this reality. In the US, in particular, the term natural on a supplement label carries no enforceable standard that would exclude synthetic stereoisomers. Menadione-derived K2 petrochemically synthesized carotenoids or GE fermented products stripped of their DNA. The burden of discernment falls on the consumer, who is rarely equipped with the information needed to make that discernment. There are signs of change. In 2025-26, the FDA moved to require mandatory notification of all substances claimed to be GRAS, that is generally regarded as safe, GRAS, which would close the self-affirmed pathway that has allowed novel fermentation-derived ingredients to reach market without formal review. So, what to look for? Astaxanthin, the source, must specify H. pluvialis or H. lactastris. Prioritize wild-caught salmon, krill oil, trout, shrimp, and crayfish as dietary sources. Vitamin E, look for a D-alpha tocopherol natural, not a DL-alpha tocopherol synthetic. Mixed tocopherols from food sources are preferable. Vitamin K2, prefer MK7 from natural fermentation, natto-derived, rather than synthetic MK4 made via menadione. Beta-carotene, favor whole food sources or mixed natural carotenoids from Salina rather than isolated synthetic all-trans beta-carotene. Folate, choose methylfolate over synthetic folic acid. particularly if MTHFR variants are a concern. CoQ10, ubiquinol, is the active bioavailable form, particularly important for those over 40. In conclusion, astaxanthin remains the clearest illustration of what is at stake when synthetic convenience replaces biological specificity. A 20-fold difference in free radical scavenging between natural and synthetic forms is not a marginal distinction. It is the difference between a supplement that works and one that does not, sold under the same name at a fraction of the cost. The same principle with varying degrees of clinical consequence applies across vitamin E, K2, beta-carotene, folate, CoQ10, and other supplements. The supplement industry's commercial incentives run in one direction: reduce production costs, maintain shelf appeal, and exploit regulatory ambiguity around the word natural. The consumer's interest runs in the other direction: maximum biological efficacy from what is consumed. Bridging that gap requires not regulation alone, though clearer standards are overdue, but an informed public that understands why, in this context, the source is the product. Know your source and know your supplement. Okay, well, that concludes this podcast. I hope you enjoyed that little bit about synthetic vitamins using astaxanthin as an example. We'll be covering supplements again more detailed in a later date. But for the time being, I'll be finishing my articles on EMF, and the next article that will be coming out will be giving you some details of what am going through with our so-called authority on EMF in Australia. ARPANSA is their abbreviation. So anyhow, keep a lookout for those articles, and thanks very much. Bye. The information in this podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Information on this podcast must be discussed with your healthcare provider. Don Want disclaims any responsibility for any adverse effect from the use of the podcast information. Guest opinions are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for the statements made by guests.